This morning we are taking up our studies in the book of Jeremiah, in Jeremiah chapter 25, beginning in verse 1. And by the way, if you would, pray for Daniel and Leo, that they'll come to know about the lion in the Bible, so that they'll come to know about Daniel, the hero who slept with the lions. Jeremiah chapter 25, beginning in verse 1. This is the word that came to Jeremiah concerning all the people of Judah in the 4th year of Jehoiakim, son of Josiah, king of Judah, which was the 1st year of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. The prophet Jeremiah spoke concerning all the people of Judah and all the residents of Jerusalem as follows. From the 13th year of Josiah, son of Ammon, king of Judah, until this very day, 23 years, the word of the Lord has come to me, and I have spoken to you time and time again, but you have not obeyed. The Lord sent all his servants, the prophets, to you time and time again, but you have not obeyed or even paid attention. He announced, turn each of you from your evil way of life and from your evil deeds. Live in the land the Lord gave you. The Lord gave to you and your ancestors long ago. Serve them and worship them, and do not provoke me to anger by the work of your hands. Then I will do you no harm. But you would not obey me. This is the Lord's declaration. In order that you might provoke me to anger by the work of your hands and bring disaster on yourselves. Therefore, this is what the Lord of hosts says. Because you have not obeyed my words, I am going to send for all the families of the north. This is the Lord's declaration. And send for my servant Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, and I will bring them against this land, against its residents, and against all these surrounding nations, and I will completely destroy them and make them a desolation, a derision, and ruins forever. I will eliminate the sound of joy and gladness from them, the voice of the groom and the bride, the sound of the millstones and the light of the lamp. This whole land will become a desolate ruin, and these nations will serve the king of Babylon for 70 years. When the 70 years are completed, I will punish the king of Babylon and that nation. This is the Lord's declaration. The land of the Chaldeans for their guilt, and I will make it a ruin forever. I will bring on that land all my words that I've spoken against it, all that is written in this book that Jeremiah prophesied against all the nations. For many nations and great kings will enslave them, and I will repay them according to their deeds and the work of their hands. Jeremiah has now been preaching for 23 years. I cannot imagine. He's been preaching and warning the people for 23 years. He's spoken what God has told them. He's used the illustrations that the Lord told him to use. He's spoken where the Lord told him to speak. Often God was very specific about where he wanted him to go and what he wanted him to say. And yet all this time the people have not listened. In verse 3 we read, from the 13th year of Josiah son of Ammon, king of Judah, until this very day, 23 years the word of the Lord has come to me, and I've spoken to you time and time again, but you have not obeyed. Notice, if you will, verse 3, he's had Jeremiah speaking since the 13th year of King Josiah's reign. Kings have come and gone, kings come and go. And the politicians and their promises come and go, but the Lord speaks and the Lord works when and where he wants to, according to his timetable. Verse 4, we read, the Lord sent all his servants, the prophets, to you time and time again, but you have not obeyed or even paid attention. According to verse 4, the Lord has sent countless prophets and preachers to warn the people again and again, but the people would not listen. They've not paid attention. So look now with me, if you will, in verse 11. This whole land will become a desolate ruin, and these nations will serve the king of Babylon for 70 years. The Lord said, here's your punishment. Those of you who survived the sword and famine and plague that I've sent, and there's not going to be many of you, Those of you who survived that, and by the way, post sure you will not because of the way you treated my servant Jeremiah. You survivors will go to Babylon, and there you will serve a pagan king for 70 years. 70 years. Have you ever wondered why the Lord, with all of the time and all of the options available to him, why did he choose 70 years? If he was going to punish the people, why not round it off to a nice, even 100? Perhaps a little easier for some of us to remember. That's a good round number. Or if he didn't want to punish them for that long, why not 50? Heaven knows most of the adults who went into captivity would have died by then. But numbers are very important to the Lord. Jesus prophesying his burial said, just as Jonah was in the belly of the fish for 3 days and 3 nights, so will I be in the earth. Or when he made the Israelites wander in the wilderness, he had them do that for 40 years, 1 year for each day. The scouts, the spies had scouted out the promised land. So why 70 years? Okay, right now, before I go any further, I want to say right now, I don't want to hear any of this trash about physician, heal thyself, or Brother Gene, practice what you preach. You understand? The Lord and I have been having discussions for several days now concerning this subject, and he and I will get it worked out. I don't, and he doesn't need your help. He's already on me about it. I don't perfectly live out anything I teach, but some of my failures are more visible and more obvious than others, and this is one of them. Now that we got the groundwork covered, let's move on. Turn with me, if you will, please, to Exodus chapter 20. Exodus chapter 20 and verse 8. Exodus chapter 20 and verse 8. And those of you familiar with the scriptures will immediately recognize this is from the Ten Commandments. And beginning in verse 8 we read, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. You are to labor 6 days and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You must not do any work. You, your son or daughter, your male or female slave, your livestock, or the foreigner who is within your gates. For the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and everything in them in 6 days. Then he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Now, as we look at this passage, I'd like you to notice something. Notice, if you will, how many words and how much area and how much time and thought and explanation the Lord devotes to this commandment. Other commandments he didn't use near as much to explain or expound. Do not kill. The Lord didn't go in to describe or explain there on the tablets about manslaughter, self-defense, capital punishment. He didn't do all of that. He did that in later passages. Do not covet. He doesn't devote a great deal of space on these tablets explaining what he means by coveting. But here, however, he uses an awful lot of those stone tablets that Moses had to carry down off the mountain, explaining what he means. I imagine Moses said, Lord, do not kill. 2 words. 3. Do not steal. 2, 3 words. Lord, do you know how much stone tablet you have devoted to this one commandment? Can't you make it a little bit shorter so I won't have to carry so much? But the Lord knew. He said, as soon as I give you these commandments to these people, they're going to start splitting hairs and looking for loopholes. They're going to start looking for a way around this. So let me make what I want and mean very clear to them. When I say a day of rest, I don't mean you take a day off and let your kids do the work. I got that covered. I do not mean you take a day off but let your employees keep working if they want to. I don't mean you rest a day, but invent a rig where your livestock can keep on working or keep plowing or grinding or whatever. The Lord says, I want to make it very clear. Shut it down. No loopholes. Now, why would the Lord make such a command? One time, some religious folks were giving Jesus a hard time about healing on the Sabbath. And he told those self-righteous, self-important folks that thought they could tell the Lord what to do, in Mark chapter 2, verse 27, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. In other words, the Lord said, I have set aside one day in 7 and have commanded you to do so for your benefit. Now, I'll come back to that in a minute. Now, in addition to the one day in 7, the Lord specifically commanded the Israelites to also set aside 1 year in 7 when they got to the Promised Land. Turn with me, please, to the book of Leviticus. Leviticus chapter 25 and verse 1. Leviticus chapter 25 and verse 1. The Lord spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai. Speak to the Israelites and tell them, when you enter the land I am giving you, the land will observe a Sabbath to the Lord. You may sow your field for 6 years, and you may prune your vineyard and gather its produce for 6 years. But there will be a Sabbath of complete rest for the land in the 7th year, a Sabbath to the Lord. You are not to sow your field or prune your vineyard. You are not to reap what grows by itself from your crop or harvest the grapes of your untended vines. It must be a year of complete rest for the land. Whatever the land produces during the Sabbath year can be food for you, for yourself, your male or female slave, and the hired hand or foreigner who stays with you. All of his growth may serve as food for your livestock and the wild animals in your land. The Lord said to the Israelites, in addition to 1 day out of 7, you're to set aside 1 year out of 7. He said you're not to plant, you're not to harvest normally 1 year out of 7. They were to let their land and their animals and their workers rest. Now, Leviticus chapter 25, verse 20. If you wonder, what will we eat in the 7th year if we don't sow or gather our produce? I will appoint my blessing for you in the 6th year, so that it will produce a crop sufficient for 3 years. When you sow in the 8th year, you will be eating from the previous harvest. You will be eating this until the 9th year when the harvest comes in. This whole letting the land rest was an act of obedience, a step of faith for the people. The Lord said, look, I want you to set aside 1 day out of 7, and I want you to set aside 1 year out of 7. Trust me in this. Look, I'm going to give you extra on the 6th year so that you'll have enough. Trust me in this. Now, I'm not going to go through the math, but basically there were 490 years the Israelites had been in the land and hadn't observed the Sabbath years the Lord commanded them. So the Lord said, you wouldn't do like I said, so I will give the land the rest I told you to give it. In 2 Chronicles chapter 36, verse 21, we read, the fulfilled word of the Lord through Jeremiah, and the land enjoyed its Sabbath rest all the days of the desolation until 70 years were fulfilled. Now back to our original question, why 70 years? Because the Lord told them to rest, to allow their families and their employees and their animals to rest, and they didn't do it. And that failure to rest and to devote themselves to the Lord and to seek Him caused them to devolve into other sins. It is impossible to outdo God. Selfish Judah decided that they would be able to get more work done or grow and accumulate wealth more quickly as a people and as a nation if they skipped the 1 year out of 7, if they skipped the rest, renewal, and recharging periods He commanded them and worked all the time. They said if we work all the time, if we're diligent, if we're faithful, if we strive, if we push all the time, we can build a nation, and we can build our home, and we can build our wealth much more quickly. This resting all the time, that is a waste of time. Silly people. It is impossible to outdo God. I guess somewhere. And somehow I've forgotten some of that myself. I guess I created that climate at my house. And Drew mentioned a while back that going away, attending school full time, and working a part-time job would seem like a vacation compared to the work we do at our house. I guess I've created a similar climate here, where some of you work 6 or 7 days a week on church-related things. When you have homes or jobs of your own to take care of. And in the book of Jeremiah, the Lord says that there is consequences to this lack of faith and this lack of obedience and to this lack of rest and faithfulness and seeking. Consequences. Jeremiah chapter 25 and verse 10. Look there with me if you will, please. I will eliminate the sound of joy and gladness from them. When you lose faith and when you lose the ability to trust the Lord, to provide or to take care of situations, and you decide that you will work through it, that you will get through this time by working more and working harder instead of praying more and trusting more, it can cause you to lose joy and gladness. When you're working and pressing and pushing, trying to wring the absolute most productivity out of every day and every week, it can cause you to lose your joy and gladness. From time to time, I find myself getting cranky and irritable. I've been known to be a bit short. Hopefully it doesn't happen too often here. Usually it happens at the house. And Gladys and Drew have a code. They'll say, Daddy's kind of tired. In other words, he's a bit cranky right now. Just let it go. Look, if you push and work and strive to get ahead all the time, without downtime, without rest, without trust and faith, you can let yourself grow weary. You lose your joy. You can lose your perspective. You can lose your gladness. Verse 10. I will eliminate the sound of joy and gladness from them. The voice of the groom and the bride. He says he will eliminate the sound of the bride and the groom. That certain relationships will be no more. How many relationships have been damaged? Have been destroyed? Between parents and their children. Between spouses. Between friends. Because one or both in the relationship have worked all the time. How many relationships have been destroyed because there was little time invested in the relationship? All those involved were too busy chasing other things. Good, growing, godly relationships require downtime. They require a porch swing and rocker time. What good will it do if you work your whole life and accumulate a lot of stuff and accomplish a lot of things if you lose the ones you want to share it with along the way? The loss of joy and gladness. A loss of relationships. But look there again, if you will, verse 10. I will eliminate the sound of joy and gladness with them, the voice of the groom and the bride, the sound of the millstones. There will be a loss of productivity. The very thing that they had been working and pushing so long for was lost along the way. That their business was lost. They no longer had the strength or the energy or the vision or the whatever to keep going. The very thing they had been pushing for all along and striving to accomplish and striving to build and striving to make into something they lost along the way because they did not pause to rest and regain their strength, renewed their vision, renewed their relationship and recharged their relationship with the Lord. The business was lost. I sat in a class of a pastor from the Chicago area who planted and successfully grew and pastored what became a large and booming church. After 20 years, he told his leaders that he was leaving because he had lost his vision and drive. If you work and push, you will lose the drive and the vision for what it is that you're seeking to accomplish in the first place. Several weeks ago, I worked at the home of a man who worked in the electrical industry, among other things. He developed, started, and ran power plants, electrical grids, and such all over the world. He worked in the Middle East for years. He ran our nation's strategic oil reserves in Louisiana and the salt domes there for years. As Drew and I were working, he told Drew about the great trips he and his wife took every 3 months while in the Middle East. But when he and I were talking, he told me about the several years he worked without taking a day off. Today, health broken, he can barely get around. The Lord tells us to rest for a reason. And one of them is that it allows us to recharge our batteries. One man challenged another to an all-day wood chopping contest. The challenger worked very hard, stopping only for a brief lunch break. The other man had a leisurely lunch and took several breaks during the day. At the end of the day, the challenger was surprised and annoyed to find the other fellow had chopped substantially more wood than he had. I don't get it, he said. Every time I checked, you were taking a rest, yet you chopped more wood than I did. But you didn't notice, said the winning woodsman, that I was sharpening my axe when I sat down to rest. Oh, my friends, without rest, without a recharge, without a renewal of vision, you'll lose your productivity. Now look there again, if you will, in verse 8. Therefore, this is what the Lord of hosts says. Because you have not obeyed my words, I am going to send for all the families of the north. This is the Lord's declaration. And send for my servant Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, and I will bring them against this land, against its residents, and against all these surrounding nations, and I will completely destroy them and make them a desolation, a derision, and ruins forever. When the people were coming into this land, the Lord said, look, you do what I tell you to do, and you do it my way, and I'm going to bless you. Man, I'm going to give you cities you didn't construct, houses you didn't build, You're going to harvest vineyards you didn't plant, drink from wells you did not dig. I'm going to bless you. But now, the relationship with the Lord is damaged. For these people, destroyed. The very blessings that they had sought, the very success that they had sought, was gone. The closeness that David and others in the Psalms and the Scriptures had once known was gone. The sense that the Lord's hand was upon them, that He was parting seas in front of them, that He was guarding their back with a pillar of fire and a pillar of cloud, those senses were gone. They were people lost, no longer remembering who they were and whose they were and what they were called to be. The partnership they once shared with the Lord was gone. The Lord, in the Ten Commandments, commanded, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy works. How do we set aside a day? How do we keep our priorities right? How do we remember one day in 7? Number one, we make it a holy day. Hebrews chapter 10 verse 27 said, let us not forsake the assembling of ourselves together as the manner of some is, but let us exhort one another, and so much the more as we see the day approaching. In other words, take a day of rest and make it a time of worship. Remember that, take a day of rest, a time of worship, to remember that we are not like the animals of the field and the birds of the air, laboring all the time, from the time we are born until the time we leave, for no reason or purpose, but that our goal and our destination is for a greater place with a greater purpose. Take the time to spend time with the Lord, worshiping, seeking His face. Make it a holy day. Second, make it a healthy day. A young boy was used to his dad giving him whatever he wanted. And he asked his dad one day, Dad, can I have some money so I can hit the flick? His dad said, no. You can flop the mop and swish the dish and spread the bed, but you can't hit the flick. We need to teach our children that they are not here just for us to support and to entertain and to take care of. The Lord did say, 6 days shalt thou labor. There's work for us to do. There's a mission for us to accomplish. There's a world for us to reach. There are orphans to teach, lost to minister to, unloved to love, shut-ins to visit. There is work to do. And we need to teach our children the importance of labor and diligence. But we need to teach them the importance of tranquility and downtime as well. Man, the other day, I was working. Somebody spoke to me, and I took my headphones off and sat them down. When I'm working, I have hearing protections. Mr. Bob, y'all may remember, Camper Bob used to be here, was largely deaf from working around equipment most of his life, and I don't want to suffer a similar fate. And so I wear hearing protection when I'm working. At least that's my excuse. I primarily do it because mine also has a radio in it, and I can listen to the radio all the time. The other day I sat it down, was talking to somebody and couldn't find it, and I ended up having to get some of mine out of the truck that didn't have a radio working in it. About killed me. I had to be alone with my own thoughts for about 2 hours. No music, no radio, no talk radio, no comedy, no nothing. What have we become? And we can't have downtime and quiet time. sit and to reason and to listen. The Lord usually speaks in a still, small voice. We need to teach our children. We need to remember ourselves the importance of being down. Allowing our commander-in-chief to give us direction. And if we're running all the time, how will we ever hear him? One of Louis L'Amour's books, years ago, I remember him telling a story of a sheriff sitting on the wooden boardwalk under the shade in a town, chair tilted back against the wall. The mayor came up to him and said, "Man, the crooks are getting away. How come you aren't chasing them?" He said, "Right now I am working. I have to ponder and think about where they'll go and what they'll do and how they'll get there and what water holes. That way I won't needlessly, mindlessly, and futilely chase them, but I can cut them off." We have to have time to stop and to think and to listen. Allow the Lord to align our priorities for the day. To ask him to align, to arrange appointments. To thank him for putting crutches in the back of a truck so you can play guns with a little boy and meet a new family. So we can thank him for sending us to a convenience store, to a drink fountain just when there's a family there looking for a place to mess with animals. Need downtime, time of tranquility. Make it a holy time. Make it a healthy time. And make it a happy time. Not a day of legalistic rules, but a time of family meals and friendly fellowship. A time of growing those connections and building those relationships and building memories that we can share into the future. Make it a happy time. Years ago, when we first started this church, we were trying to figure out what kind of church we wanted it to be. And we set a number of priorities. We said we'd do whatever it took to reach our community. We talked about the type of music that we wanted to establish, the type of translation of the Bible we would use. We talked about a number of things. And one of the things that we talked about is that, or decided, was that we would not have Sunday evening services. Now, from time to time, we'll have a special study for a short period of time. But, churches in the Scripture talk an awful lot about family. And if you're not careful, churches can get you so busy that there's no time for family. And we decided along the way that we wanted to make sure, at least the vast majority of the time, that we would set Sunday evenings aside so there would be time for family, so that it could be a day of rest and relaxation. For long ago, someone very dear to us all once said, "Come unto me, all ye who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest."